Nigeria journalists today were charged to understand budget tracking for effective implementation. Speaking at the Young Journalists Forum, Dr. Abraham, an economist and a public analyst, noted that 2020 budget was reversed several times. He then charged Nigerians to track budget preparation, enlightenment, implementation, and oversight, as well as engage the government.
The 2020 budget was revised several times so that we can have the tune of 10.81 trillion for 2020 federal government budget. In 2021, that figure became 13.59 trillion for 2021. But if you look at the level of budget implementation for 2020, 2019, 2018, and backwards, hardly do we as a country ever achieve a significant percentage of capital budget implementation. The budget, as you know it, has a revenue dimension and an expenditure dimension. The way the budgeting system works in Nigeria, the revenue we expect to get to fund our expenditure is based on some assumptions: projected oil price, projected crude oil production, projected average exchange rate, and projected inflation rate, as well as GDP growth rate. But because of the effect of COVID-19, it has been difficult to understand how these variables will behave for 2021. But what is clear is that there's need for more spending so that we can address all the challenges of our development. So, in terms of understanding the budget, how to track the budget for effective implementation, this is what to do. First, know that there are 4 stages in the budget process: preparation, enactment, implementation, and oversight. Usually, we don't engage the government enough at the preparation stage. At the stage where they are making assumptions for medium-term expenditure framework, revenue framework, medium-term sector strategy paper, we don't usually engage the government enough. And what happens in that stage is that every sector of the economy, education, health, and the rest, you will have a policy for them so that you can program financially what is needed in those sectors to achieve the needed or the set targets for them, maybe in the context of sustainable development goals, for instance. But usually, most of us become involved in the budget at that stage where the president goes to the National Assembly to present it to the joint sitting of the National Assembly, which is what we call the first hearing of the budget. That is where mostly media attention is paid to in terms of the budget process. At the level of the state, the level where the state government is signing or is presenting the budget to the state assembly, that's where media attention is drawn. But the first point for you to know about budget tracking is that engage the government well before it is presented for hearing at the assembly. If you don't engage the government from those early beginning, you will miss out a lot of process. Secondly, when the budget has been passed by the National Assembly or the State Assembly, it is still up to us to follow in terms of knowing what was approved for each sector the previous year and what level of implementation was attained, so that we can be able to track, to watch out for how far the budget will go in the current year. Then, one other thing we don't do is we always tend to undermine the process of oversight or implementation. Usually, the way the federal government reports budget implementation is that for a specific sector, we budgeted a specific amount. Then we have released a specific percentage, then that percentage has been utilized. When the Office of Accountant General reports that percentage of utilization, the government stops there on paper. Now, the media has a huge role to play from that stage. If, for instance, a particular amount of money is released for the Ministry of Education, and by the end of the budget year, only 40% has been utilized. One other way of tracking the budget is to try to get the details of all the projects that they said they will use that will be implemented within the context of that sector. When you get the location of those projects, try to follow to those locations to see if what they said they've released match what you see on ground. So evidence media-based tracking of the budget is very important. Go beyond the accounting books. If I tell you I have used 10% of the money you gave me as transport, bottom line is, where is the receipt for the transport? I've shown you, right? Now try to go to the site where that particular project has been implemented to see if what it's on ground match what has been reported as expenditure utilized. Picture and video reporting, media tracking of the budget process is very important to hold the government to account. One other concept I'd like to tell us in this brief minute is that there's this media budget tracking tool called Economic Literacy and Budget Accountability for Governance. The budget is an economic tool of the government to implement all its projects within a year. So you need to understand the economics of government budget. The budget that we always pay attention to is expenditure. We don't pay too much attention to the revenue side. And that revenue is also important because budget is revenue plus expenditure. Borrowing is expenditure is higher than revenue. If you sustain that for a period of time, our borrowing level will keep going up like that. And for the government, where there's revenue shortfall and every sector is clamoring for more actions, government cannot ignore not borrowing, because the decision to borrow for government comes from what they call debt sustainability analysis, and they use three indicators to do that: debt to GDP ratio, debt to revenue ratio, debt to export ratio. Based on GDP ratio, our government can keep borrowing for a long period of time because that indicator shows that borrowing for Nigeria is still sustainable. But based on debt to revenue, it shows that we cannot keep borrowing the way we want. So knowing what government is borrowing for, which states will be benefiting from the borrowing, is also important for budget tracking. Go to those states that will be benefiting from the borrowing. Hold government to account to let you know who is benefiting from the borrowing that government is embarking on. And to those specific states, what project will you be doing? Show us the location of those projects that you'll be doing before the project starts, then during the project process, and after the project is complete. You make effective use. It will not give you everything, but you can be able to make the most use of it. For instance, one of the things we've emphasized to ourselves here is that before you hear that the president will be presenting the appropriation bill to a joint sitting of the National Assembly on so dates, before that process, know that Federal Ministry of Finance, through its budget and budget office, through the budget office, would have put out budget call circular. Did you even know about it? So what we are saying is that as they are putting it out from the comfort of your room or office, Federal Ministry of Finance puts out call circular. This call circular has specified maximum ceilings, expenditure ceilings for 10 MDAs. With these ceilings we are saying, it's unlikely that if these figures make it as the real allocation to these sectors in 2022, it is not likely that their desires will be achieved to help us attain the SDGs. We have stopped there. This little thing you've done has helped you to follow a pre-preparation budget activity. Then the budget preparation stage, that is that part where the president lays before the joint sitting of the National Assembly or the governor gives to the legislature at the state level. What you want to do is, the proposed budget that will be presented today is of so amount. Compared to last year's own, this is 10% or 20% bigger or smaller. Looking at the actual amount used or available for the budget last year, it was 40% less than what was proposed or what was approved. With 40% shortage of last year, how will the government achieve the proposed budget for next year that has increased by 80% over last year's own from newspaper, person reporting? You see, you are following small. Then when the budget is enacted, the budget of XX trillion has been enacted this year. In the last 4-5 years, we have not achieved 50% implementation, especially in this sector, that sector. With this amount that has been enacted, let us hope that the revenue to do this will be available. So the Minister for Finance, this person, that person, we need to explain to Nigerians how it will be done. From social TV, from social newspaper, from social radio, from social online medium, you and you reporting. Then we're already in what month now? April, entering May. It is, don't forget, 2020 budget in terms of capital implementation ended in March. Knowing the news again, that's why I say following the process is bigger and better than following just fractions. If you follow the process, you will know when 2020 budget ended. But when it was March 30th, which of you as media players put it on your news? Today is March 30th. Capital budget for 2020 is ending. How far with implementation? So and so with me on the studio to discuss.
Sometimes we don't actually get value for our money. The budget is made up of taxpayers' money, and this is an opportunity to sensitize taxpayers to say we must follow our budget to ensure that they are implemented so that we can get a better Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the most hit as far as poverty is concerned. We are still the poverty capital of the world, and this is caused by illicit financial flow. We must be able to track our budget to mitigate these excesses, especially in quarters of governance.
Media has a major role to play, locally and globally on salient issues, and Global Right has always been very effective in working with the media to ensure that our advocacy efforts, are amplified, and that is why we are here today. We hope that the lessons we will learn from the training on budgeting would go back with those lessons and apply them to our work as media practitioners, especially as we are at a time right now in the country where every time we open through the newspapers or we watch television, all we see is the nation is bleeding, Nigeria is bleeding, there's insecurity here and there. We believe that there is a very big relationship between how the financials of the country, the budget of the country is being put into place and insecurity. There's a very strong relationship between our financials and insecurity. And at Global Rights, recently, we've been doing a lot of advocacy around the insecurity in the country. And we really do hope that we'll go back home with lessons from here and apply it to our work as media practitioners, push for efforts around asking the government push for efforts around seeking for accountability on the way the budget is being funded, on the way the budget is being used, and on the actions of state actors as it relates to security.
Michael Chidi, reporting for GTV Africa, Abuja.